Hello and welcome to GreenFleet Talks. My name is Kate Armitage and I'm your host for our discussion today. And I'm delighted to be joined by Keith Shorter, who is Van and Trucks Director at Europcar. Hi, Keith.
Good morning, Kate. How are you?
I'm very well. Yeah, it's good to speak to you again too. Thank you for joining me. Now, Keith, the clue is in your job title, because today we're going to be discussing larger vehicles and the complexities of transitioning them to net zero. As the director of Europcar vans and trucks, what are you and your team hearing from your customers about how they're managing the transition to zero?
Well, firstly, we are seeing that the customers are now starting to recognise the value in terms of the environment, especially. That's being driven, I think, with an increased expansion of the low and ultra clean air zones, and that's really focusing their minds that they've got to think differently for the future. So it's not just a status quo that can carry on. But then their first focus, Kate, becomes about running a compliant fleet. It's not a full or partial switch to EV that's the predominant. It's their first and foremost thought is to be compliant with the clean air zones. So it's still early days for many businesses. It's true that supply hasn't caught up with demand in all sectors, and it's also true to say that in some sectors demand is still soft. And I think that is around the use case, the location, the demographic, etc. in the country. So it's also about winning the hearts and minds of the drivers, the people who are actually using the vehicles and getting their buy-in as much as the policy from above. And in that respect, we get really good feedback from the people that have driven EV vehicles and the hybrids. So that's always a good start when we can get the real end user on board as well.
Well, you say it's a good start, but actually I think it's also a good ending, because what I'm hearing from so many fleets now is you can only go so far if you haven't won hearts and minds. You know, you can do the low-hanging fruit, but then it gets hard and you really need people to be bought into it.
Yes, indeed. And again, it gets hard for a majority of reasons, whether that's home charging, whether that's restructuring the business, whether it's HR. There's a lot of other things to consider, whether they used to take the vehicle home and now they can't. Yeah. So there's a whole lot of, for a full transition, it becomes really complicated.
Yeah. Well, we don't have to be talking about a full transition. Like you say, baby steps.
Baby steps. Yeah.
So do you, from the conversations that you've had, do you think your commercial fleet users understand the options that are available to them in this transition?
I think it's almost divided in half, Kate. I think from the fleet managers already have made the leap or have done a little bit of exploration around making that leap are pretty well informed. I think it's a minefield for some of the smaller fleet managers with the ever-changing range of new battery tech, new models for 23, 24, payloads apart, and especially some concerns around the real-world range versus the WLTP figure. So I think there's a change. Once you're on the journey, you get immersed in the journey. So I think there's... And obviously you face the challenges quicker. The quicker you go across, the quicker you face the challenges, the quicker it becomes an operational point as much as it does as a product, because the vehicle is still there to deliver or to aid their business as a tool. So there is always a workaround. But yeah, the more informed ones are the guys that have already started the journey, or they've got a corporate policy or something along their lines that's sort of like, held their hand through the first stages a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to be said for learning by doing. Yeah. You mentioned, Keith, a minute ago, the ULEZ and clean air zones, and that sounds like a challenge for a lot of your customers. What are you doing to support those customers?
So it's definitely the case that the CAS and the ULEZ, as I mentioned earlier, are one of the driving factors to drive change. Obviously, 10 clear air zones are more scheduled. Obviously, clarity of message helps. It's still unclear after the recent government announcements if any of those schemes that are in the waiting behind what the timescales of those are. So that's a little bit of uncertainty. But I think it's just like, let's focus on one. Let's just take inside the M25. Obviously, we operate across the whole of the UK and Ireland, but inside the M25, the cost of running a non-compliant vehicle ranges from £625 to £4,375 a year. That's whether you're going in 1 day a week or 7 days a week in the terms of your business. Replacing every van for a company, you've got to have really deep pockets to do that. So how are we assisting? Well, I'll touch on a little bit more at the moment, but that amount of investment from an SME or a micro SME or even some of the corporates is prohibitive. So our solution helps them to keep that bottom line cost away from their business.
Yeah, and you're talking about a lot of cost here. You know, you gave some numbers there. So. And for some of these businesses, they may not have anticipated that. I mean, you could say that some of these clean air zones haven't been well advertised or well communicated. And of course, if you're operating a national fleet, you could have vehicles all over the country that are in and out of these zones.
Yeah, so I think it's not just the people that are parked up and affected inside those areas. It's you know, just take vending machines. You're in and out of every kind of from a rural hospital to, you know, a city centre office block on a daily basis. So it's really about understanding that, and I think that telematics is a good way, and the data recording of that and journey planning and helping with that is a really good way that we assist. So you can have what is feasible in the short term, what is feasible in the long term to help customers build their strategy.
And what kind of operational changes have you made, Keith, to streamline the customer experience around compliance?
Yeah, so obviously, first of all, to be compliant, all of our 10,000 plus fleet of vans and trucks are compliant. So that helps. Anything you take from us, you haven't got to worry about.
And that what does that add? That normally means that they are Euro 5 and above or Euro 6 and above?
Yeah, Euro 6 and above for the van and truck world, yes, or hybrid or EV. So we have 65 van locations and our 13 specialist super sites across the UK, which can assist. So we're in, as well as very near the edge of all of the clean air and the CASU-less zones. And for aid in that, we also allow the customer to put on any extras they may have for that transition on a short-term vehicle or a mid-term vehicle. So whatever they might use, from their livery to roof bars to tow bars to racking, whatever it is, as well as a pre-built fleet that's compliant. In how are we helping directly? Well, last time we spoke to you, we touched on the interactive van and truck website launch in 2022 that's been honed and developed. We've now added some other features. We've now got to do a new delivery and collection app that helps just with the condition of the vehicle and what they're taking and going. An online digital fair wear and tear guide, so a customer that's a little bit concerned about moving from that purchase or long-term lease model to a higher model has the peace of mind around that fair wear and tear and what's expected of the vehicle condition. Obviously, we've partnered with ZapMap recently as well, which is we're rolling out now, so you can access that through our new EV website. So we have a EV website building with the cars up first, but the van's coming. That gives the spec sheets, how to drive, how to utilize, you know, how every operational benefit of that car as well. So you have the expertise in the stations. You have online resource guides for the spec sheets of the vehicle, where to charge it, etc. We have EV charge cards as well. So we have this growing and more sophisticated set of tools, if you like, that aid that customer journey.
Great. Okay. And I mean, that some of that is quite specific to electric vehicles, isn't it? Yeah.
Dedicated EV website.
Yeah. So this has been a big part of the decarbonised journey that you're going on with your customers?
Yes, indeed. I think driving experience is the starting point. for getting the true buy-in. So especially small SMEs find it hard to access a vehicle for a real-world trial. So it's very good the manufacturer letting them drive it around the industrial estate for an hour. It's not quite the same when you're on a cold morning, or you're at the limit of your payload, or you're at your limit of your range. So we offer a try before you buy approach. So that gives the real world, and that's especially good. Corporates have a little bit more sway with some of the OEMs, but for us, we've got we can get a micro SME into a trial and have a real world 3-4 days a week trial in a vehicle, and then report back. And I think that's aided by the lessons we learned. We took part in the GreenFleet rally this year. We took 3 cars and 1 van all the way across UK and Ireland, which was a fantastic experience. And there's lots of video footage of how well that went and the learning. But what you may not be aware of is we also took customers with us on that journey.
Okay.
So we actually had. Which was, we didn't publish, but we had fleet managers and some of our customers with us in the back of the vehicles while we drove around.
Were they driving? And were these?
They were driving as well. Yes.
Yeah, and were these fleets who currently haven't got any electric vehicles, or were they already on board, if you like?
No, fleets had expressed an interest or some reservation about EV. They weren't quite sure. Early conversations, rather than people who were already, preaching to the converted is easy. It's preaching to the unconverted that's harder. So it was really good to log all of their feedback as well, not only about how the vehicle drove and how operational the van was, etc., how it might fit their business, but also around the whole charging infrastructure and how we could go around the whole of the UK and Ireland without any major hiccups, in terms of finding charging infrastructure, etc. And
I'm interested, Keith. Did you convert them, or were you left thinking actually there is still some work to do here and we need to address these concerns?
I think it's really interesting exercise, because we had a range of products. We didn't, in terms of 3 cars and a van, all very different. It's really different between the driving experience was really positive. The choice of van was still limited, as we know, in terms of things that we would be prepared to offer in terms of that would actually fit their business needs. So we have to be very careful about what we recommend. We can't just persuade and push people in a direction where there's a business tool that you can't. You have to let them make their own mind up on where they feel comfortable.
Yeah. Great, good. Oh, well, I'd quite like to see more of that, Keith, to be honest with you. I think, the rally was effectively a motivator to get these fleet managers actually into the vehicles, but there's no reason why that couldn't be a year-round activity, isn't it? Yeah,
indeed. Obviously, there's a promotional point, there's a marketing point, there's a practicality point, and our own internal learnings from the rally have actually completely shaped the priority of the information that we give.
Right.
If that makes sense. There are things that the baseline things that are important that we may think of from an internal perspective. So we have the experience. 85% of our own car fleet now is fully electric. So we have our own internal feedback, but that's in our environment.
Yeah.
It's getting the feedback from their real world environment and then prioritizing what they need to know and what's important to the customer.
Absolutely. Where they may not have depot charging, they may not have access to home charging, where they're doing longer mileages, more unpredictable routes. There's so much to this.
Route planning, Kate, is one of the major. You don't have to. Everyone thinks about topping out of charging that vehicle completely up and then using it and charging it up and completely using it again. And the EV rally proved that isn't the case. No. Little and often for what you need. Overnight, address any concerns, but you can operate your business with the little and often, and that was probably our biggest learning.
Great. And it does sound like that whole try before you buy approach is absolutely perfect for these smaller fleets who are more likely to be risk averse, I think. So finally then, Keith, can you sum up, where does Europcar fit in the world of low and zero emission motoring?
Oh, obviously we're a global mobility provider, Kate. So obviously England and Ireland are just a tiny part of all of the learnings that we have internally and we share. But I think we're in a unique position. We're walking. We're walking the talk, if you like. We're out there. We're doing what we say we're going to do, and I think the approach is vastly different. We're not trying to persuade businesses. We're not. You can't go in there and say this is the best thing for your business when wholly at the moment it may not be. So this transition piece that we're going through now and to 2035 being the new date. We're just focused on giving them the right solution for their business, and being practical. You can't go in and demand a whole fleet from a sales angle. You can't expect the customer not to have concerns. Yeah. But also internally, we're aiding that. Obviously, we have 200 EV charging points now across our network internally, so we can get quicker turnarounds. That's close on 50% of our network, and the rest is going to be due within the year. So we have our own vehicles charging, we have the customer's vehicle charging, so we can turn around an EV in a really quick time now compared with where we were maybe 18 months to 2 years ago.
Brilliant. Well, that's great news. Keith, it has been a pleasure talking to you today. Thank you very much for your insight, as always. And thank you, of course, to Europcar for joining GreenFleet Talks.
No problem at all, Kate. Look forward to seeing you again. Take care.
I look forward to speaking to you again soon too. And thank you for watching. Please tune in to GF365 again soon.